Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Masterclass. Today we're going to be talking about becoming a subject matter expert, and we really want to spend some time on this because there's quite a lot of detail to go through. Not everyone loves talking about data, so we're going to break it apart in a fair bit of detail. But to give you guys a little bit of background before we jump into things, my name is Narelle Stefanak. I'm the National Client Training Manager at Seek. I've been around for a little while. This is my 11th year with the team, so if you have any questions at all, please fire them at me. Really happy to sort of go off on tangents as we need to. We've got a full hour for today's session, but in reality, it should probably only take about 45 minutes. So if you do have questions, please pose them either throughout the session. We'll also park a couple of minutes at the end just to answer any loose end questions right at the very tail end of this session. But we will be recording today's session, and we'll also send you a copy of the handouts. But to help you guys get through what's actually happening throughout the course of today, there's a few things going on. Firstly, we'll be talking through a number of different topics. So we've combined this masterclass series. So there's three main topics that we can really focus on. The very first one of these, which we're honing in on today, is all about becoming a subject matter expert. And the reason why this one is so critical in the three is that it helps you set up and frame out why I would go about sourcing talent in a particular way. So would I advertise? Would I talent search? Would I do both? And how would I best manage the hiring manager's expectations so I can get the right outcome? So that's why we're spending so much time on it right up front. So again, if you do want to ask questions, we've got a few ways for you to be able to do that. Firstly, I prefer that you guys type your questions into the question box. You'll see that located on your little drop-down menu. But if you can type them in, it just makes it so much easier for me. At the moment, we have 121 of you online, and I'm expecting that to probably push up to about 200 of you later as we get started. But if you could type your questions in there, that would be wonderful. Also, we've made some of the handouts available to you right now. So if you go into your little menu area, there will be a handout drop down. When you click on that, there should be two handouts in there. There's two PDFs. One is the Industry Insights for Australia, which I'll talk you through later during today's session. The other is a copy of today's session notes. So if you want access to these and don't want to have to wait until we send them out tomorrow, by all means, you can just download them today during the course of the session. And we'll also send a copy of the recording and the copy of the presentation tomorrow as well, just in case you have any issues downloading them right now. All right, so what is becoming a subject matter expert all about? I guess the key thing to think about here is really thinking about, do we understand what the hiring manager is actually after? So when you go in to take a job brief, I guess the real failing with a lot of people is that they'll go, right, what are you looking for? When do you need them to start? What are their tasks? What are their duties? Do you have a PD? And we sort of jump straight into the farming of the actual opportunity. And the real opportunity that exists is that we should be educating the hiring manager on the way through. So we want to be able to talk through and help people get through what it is that they're actually looking for. So in terms of becoming a subject matter expert, I guess the key thing to think about is, how do I best manage the hiring manager's expectations, and how do I manage the candidate's expectations? Because the worst thing I could do is to sit down and take a very detailed and a very narrow brief to the point where I can't actually fill the role. And my background before joining Seek, I worked in the recruitment industry for a number of years as well, and I've done it. I've been there. I've taken that unicorn brief, I've made it sound really, really good, and I can understand what that needle in a haystack looks like. And then I go off and try and find the candidate, and sometimes they just don't exist. And what happens is that I end up spending all my time spinning my wheels, and we want to try and avoid that. What we want to do is we want to understand the employment market at large. So what's happening across Australia in the employment marketplace? How does it relate to me and the roles that I'm trying to hire for? How does it impact hiring managers when I'm trying to provide consultative advice to them? How do I position myself as a subject matter expert within a particular discipline? And how do I really get into the nuts and bolts of how easy or difficult it will be to source talent in those roles? Because if you have all of that information at your disposal, then you can influence the hiring manager when you're taking the job brief, before you even start going down and start thinking about what should we be doing, who should we be looking for, how should we be sourcing them. So that's why this part of the process is really critical. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a few things, but I guess the main thing that we're going to be focusing on is data. And there's a lot of data out there. You can go to lots of different websites, you can get lots of data from Seek, but if you just get data and push it out to the hiring managers and expect them to understand it, it's not going to work and it's not going to do you any justice. For you to position yourself as a subject matter expert, you need to be able to take that data, make it really simple, understand it, and then communicate it in a way that's really compelling. Because if you can't do that, then what will happen is that they'll just think that you don't know what you're talking about, right? If you can't explain it simply enough, then they just don't think you understand it. So we really need to move the dial and just getting and data and just pushing it out to people and getting them to hold the responsibility and accountability of making a decision. What we want to do is we want to interpret that data and go, well, what that could potentially mean is these three things. So how would we respond to the marketplace if we knew this in advance? What would we do differently? How would we change our talent sourcing methods? How would we either dial up in certain areas or pull back in others? What would we be willing to do? So we really want to make sure that when we go through all of these data sets that I'm going to share with you today, that it's not just about getting them, but it's about getting them, understanding them, interpreting them, and then knowing how to improve the dialogue that you're having with your hiring managers. So what I'm going to get you to do is I'm going to put a poll up on your screen. Don't answer this question just yet. I'm going to launch it on your screen. You should see it soon. But I really want to know, where do you collect employment data and insights from at the moment? So you don't collect anything at the moment, that's okay. If that's the case, click that. You can select as many as you like. If you get it off government websites like the ABS, social sites like Twitter, or maybe from Seek directly because we produce industry insights as well, or do you pay for reports like IBIS World? So select as many as you utilise on that little polling screen, and then I'll publish them so that you can all see, and that will help me understand how we're going to sort of navigate through the next set of information as well. Because the last 2 years at Seek, we've been coaching businesses on how to use external sources and also Seek sources to be able to get interesting industry insights and data. And we're going to show you how to do that at large, but then we'll also bring it back and pair it back to how you can get some really relevant niche stuff for your region, your location, your industry that you operate in. So majority have voted, 3/4 of you have voted. I might just publish those results so that you can see them. So let me close that off and share them up on the screen. All right, so we see that the majority of you don't actually use data at the moment at all. And that's fairly common. Don't feel like you're a little bit left of center. It is really common circumstance that people don't collect data because it's too time consuming is usually the biggest piece of feedback that we have. They don't know where to go. They don't know how relevant it is. They don't know how to rationalize it. So it just becomes quite an overwhelming process. And we're just too busy, right? Everyone's bloody busy. So how do we actually take the time to get some of this information? So my process is that I don't like wasting time either, and I'm very time poor. So I like to be able to do things really, really quickly. I'm going to show you all my shortcuts, how to get information, where I get it from, how you can then manipulate it as well. I like the fact that about 35% of you are using social sites. I think that's such a great idea. If you're not familiar with using Twitter and you're always like, I don't really care if someone's eaten a sandwich, you know, that's the reason, that's the barrier for me to go onto Twitter. Twitter's actually matured quite a lot. And I love using Twitter just for a quick check, a sanity check of what's the latest research that might have been published, because a lot of organisations use Twitter to be able to get their research out. And they do a lot of research or white papers that they publish so that you can then sort of loop around and start buying their products. But I think if you can understand what the sorts of terms you can use, because if in Twitter you're capped at a number of characters that you can actually use. So if you put in something like diversity, women in the workforce, or keywords that you think that people might publish if they wrote a paper on it, maybe report or paper, white paper, those sorts of words, and you put them in your search field in Twitter, it could return you some really good results and give you some interesting insights into businesses you may not have ever been led to before. So definitely think about that. I love that 32% of you are using Seek's data. That's great. I'm going to show you how to do it. 6% of you are using paid reports. The ones that I'm going to show you today, I'm not going to show you any paid reports because I want you to be able to access information without having to get any internal approvals. But if you are going to use internal ones, I would be, paid ones. IBISWorld is a great one to use. In fact, I think my next screen shows, so let me just hide this poll. I think it shows you, yeah, the couple of different things that we use. So you guys should be able to see my screen again. And what we're looking at here is there's a couple of main sources that people traditionally use, and IBISWorld and Euromonitor are two really good sources for information. Now, Euromonitor is very much a global scale, so if you operate globally, fantastic. It gives you information around emerging trends as well. So if you want to see what's happening in Southeast Asia and you think it may happen in Australia, you can pay to get those reports. IBISWorld I love because they take about 1,000 different industry clusters and they actually do a really detailed report on the size of the market, the main players in the marketplace, so what market share they have, what external environmental, economical, technology factors are impacting those businesses, where they see the growth to be, where the growth has been, what the actual revenue that flows through that industry looks like, what are the real challenges that they're going to be faced with moving forward. So I love IBISWorld from a very strategic point of view, but you know, that's very difficult if you just need to find an electrician. You probably don't need to spend all your time looking through a really detailed report. This is probably more for your strategic planning within your business. These open access websites I love. So we have a blog called insight.seek.com.au, and that blog we will do a whole range of information that will be helpful in your roles, but it'll also have information around industry specific areas that we've covered as well. So we might take an industry once a month and then dice it apart and pull out the key findings of how it's growing, how it's trending, and what the real pressure points may look like moving forward. A lot of the information that we get that's independent and available to people is through the Job Outlook portal, and I'm going to show you that one as we go through the presentation today. But I love Job Outlook, and the reason why I love it is because there's over 400 occupations that you can go into, and they write commentary and one pages on the state of that industry or that occupational group. So if you are looking for electricians, it'll tell you what the employment's been like for the last 10 years, how it's trended, what they project it's going to be like. So is it going to be easy or difficult to resource for talent? What's the gender split? What's the demographic profiling for that industry? What sort of educational profile do they have? Lots of really rich, insightful information that you can really use to help position yourself as that expert in the marketplace. And a lot of people use their own internal data. I think internal data is really underutilized. Where we see the trend sort of moving to is that you'll be using your internal data to do some predictive analysis. Okay, you can see as you promote people through your business, there'll be a trend, and so you should be able to look for those trends within your business, but also outside of your business. And if you're a recruitment consultant, even better. Okay, imagine if you could actually say to your hiring managers that we know that people that are state managers today were sales executives with at least 3 years experience with this level of education, and that's what they were 5 years ago. So anyone that's got 5 years experience as a sales executive, they are at the right time to be able to convert up to a state manager level role. So you'd be able to help them understand what the movement of candidates look like naturally and use a lot of the data that you've collected over periods of time, whether you've placed those candidates or you haven't. So I'd be looking at internal data to do some real predictive analysis of where the trends are actually sitting right now in the candidate pools that you manage. So there's so much data out there. It's about what do you do with it. So let's talk about some of these macro trends. I love macro trends because what it does is it helps position your understanding, or it helps set your mind in a way that you can actually go, okay, I understand what's happening in Australia. I now understand what's happening in my state. I understand what's happening in my region. I understand what's happening in the industry that I work within. And it helps you sort of build out these really big clusters and then cross-pollinate. So you can say, okay, well, this is what's happening in Australia, and this is our industry and our location, and it's twice as hard for us to be able to recruit than anywhere else in Australia. So we have a real issue. We need to do things differently. And that may be all the data that you need to be able to get change happening within your business, to speed up your recruitment processes, to partner with recruitment agencies, to be able to look at what it is that you are looking for in candidates, to identify skill gaps within your business. So with these external data sets, there's a couple of sites that I use. The first one is LMIP. Now, LMIP is a labour market information portal. And the one thing that I love about the labour market information portal is that it's going to be able, it basically frames up the top level reports in a commentary. So I'm going to take you to this one in a second. It gives you commentary on what's happening across Australia, what are the big 5 industries that are growing, what are the ones that are in decline, and how have they trended over time. But there's heaps of narration. And the good thing about narration is it gives you a story. It helps you understand the data. So if you're no good at data, if you look at an Excel spreadsheet and go, I have no idea what I'm looking at or what I'm going to do with that, then the Word document is brilliant. And I'm going to show you how I've taken some of the commentary out of that, and then I've sliced it into some graphs to be able to position it internally. So I'm going to show you how that comes together in a second. There's also really good deeper dives into what happens at an industry and regional level. So many of you that have dialed in today aren't in the metro area. A lot of you are actually regional. And you go, okay, well, that's great that that's happening in Sydney, but I'm in Ballarat. Okay, so you might find that, well, that doesn't relate to me. Okay, I really need to know what's happening regionally. So they give you that level of information at an industry level. So I'll show you how to manipulate some of this data. Some of it is Excel spreadsheets, I will warn you, but if you're good, if you can take some data sets and then manipulate them into simple graphs, you'll be surprised with how that can help you influence hiring managers or even just get your head around what's actually happening. Yeah, my screen sharing, just some people were saying, is my screen sharing at the moment? And it is. I'll just double check that it's coming up. Yeah, it's coming up on my screen. Let me just go back to Michelle. Send privately. Okay, beautiful. All right, so I'm going to show you, okay, because I want to show you some of the key things that you can get out of this website, and then I'll show you how I've pulled this information out. So what we're going to do is I've just navigated away to the internet, so you guys should be able to see this. You guys should be able to see the full screen, my URL address at the top. If you can't see it, please let me know. And what I'm going to pop up on the screen, I'm going to download this Industry Employment Projections Report. And that's just downloaded down here, so I'll open it up and you'll see a Word document opening up as well. So, and Michelle, if you're on the line, it's only your screen that's frozen. Everyone else is able to see my screen. So maybe just, even if you want to log out and log back in again, see if that helps you. So what you'll see here, and I'm just going to move this into one screen, is they give you this beautiful narration. This is what I was talking about. So they tell you things like, based on some forecasts that they've done, they've used a whole range of different sources which are listed on that website as well. But they project that the total employment across Australia is going to increase by almost 1.2 million people over the next 5 years, which is about 10%. Now, to give you some perspective, when they did this report last year, the projection was 7.2%. So they know that they believe that the employment marketplace is going to grow at a faster rate. So we're starting to rebound. We're starting to pick up pace. They're starting to get some more business confidence back into the marketplace. So that would mean that ultimately, if whatever we were feeling last year, it's probably going to start to get a little bit tighter across most industries. But they do actually break apart which ones are growing and which ones are shrinking. And there's 17 out of the 19 industries that they've mapped that basically they're saying 17 out of 19 are in growth mode, 2 are in decline. And those 2 are mining and manufacturing. And I'll talk about those in a little bit. They do go through what are the big growth industries, these top 5, and I'll show you how I've plotted these for you as well. But then they also go through and break them apart and give you this beautiful commentary. Wonderful. If you work in the healthcare industry, you have to recruit in the healthcare industry. So it's just going to come up on your screen in a second. It'll give you this trending, the projection. It'll tell you why they think it's going to happen this way. And it really helps you get your head around why do we think there's going to be pressure points in where we're recruiting for today. If we think we can do what we've always done, it's probably not going to work. If we think that it's going to be just as easy to find people as it was 5 years ago, you're probably incorrect. And there's a lot of different reasons why. Not only is our population growing, it's aging, we're getting pressure points at the top end and the bottom end of the scale. There's so many things that are happening that are going to be impacting on employment growth that we need to be rethinking the way that we've always done things. And often hiring managers don't have to replace constantly. Often hiring managers might only have to replace every year, 3 years, 5 years in some instances. So they won't be as connected to what's happening in this real-time marketplace right now. And so I'd be educating the hiring manager based on the industry that you operate in and how that relates to the national average. Okay, so this one, healthcare, you can see that they're saying that it's going to grow by 18.7% nationally. Now, the national average for all industries was only 10%. That's almost double the national average. So you could imagine that it'd be probably twice as difficult to resource talent in this industry in comparison to anything else across the country. So that's the sort of messaging that we want to take out of it. We don't need all of the bits and pieces, but we want to be able to say, okay, well, let's compare one data point to the national average and see, are we above the line, below the line? What does that mean to us? So I've pulled this together for you. I'm going to show you in this little one here. I'll go back to the presentation. You should come with me in a second. I was just thinking, give it a couple of seconds, it'll come back to my screen. Here we go. So what you should see on your screen is a map of Australia, and that's the national average. 10% employment growth is projected over the next 5 years. Now, the big industries that are going to be impacting that, we're talking about healthcare and social assistance, education and training, professional, scientific and technical services. That's quite a big category. It covers a lot of you. Anyone who needs a uni degree, they could be in IT, they could be in science, they could be in a professional legal role, accounting role. So it covers quite a broad spectrum. Accommodation and food services. So that's more your hospitality area, and construction. They're your top 5 movers and shakers across Australia. But not all industries are the same. And I'm going to talk about, actually, I'll go through the declining industries as well, and I'll go through the growth industries, and I'll give you some commentary around why they're moving, but then I'll snap back to that website and I'll show you how you can find out really specific information for your industry in your location. So one thing that is in decline, and you guys have heard a lot about this, no doubt, is the manufacturing industry. But it hasn't fallen off a cliff, right? That's not a cliff fall. That's a slow, long-term decline, and that's been happening since the early 80s. Manufacturing is cheaper to do offshore. And the reason why it's so in the headlines at the moment is, one, we have access to a lot of social media, so it's really easy to get access to information these days, but also because they're big brands. Okay, the likes of Toyota, Holden, Ford, Qantas, a lot of these organisations have been moving their manufacturing offshore. And they've been making really large-scale redundancies, but over a long time period. So it has gotten a lot of attention, a lot of notice as well, but this has actually been a long-term trend that will continue in Australia. There will be still pockets of manufacturing, especially around food manufacturing, that will still continue to be quite buoyant in Australia, but more around the motor vehicles and parts manufacturing that will tend to go offshore. Mining, and I'm a Queensland girl, so mining's had a very different trajectory. What we've seen is this fast growth, and it even continued to grow during GFC because there were a lot of government support and in terms of trying to create jobs during a downturn to try and offset the idea that we might go into a recession. So a lot of mining companies were being able to get approvals on going into feasibility studies, going into construction and operation stages with their mines, but they all came online at the same time. And construction of a mine site usually takes about a 7-year cycle, right? So they'll come in, they'll construct, and they'll have to dig things out. They have to build roads, rail, housing, ports, a whole range of stuff. It takes up a lot of headcount. But once it's all built, it just needs to operate. And in that operational phase, it's a lot leaner. They don't need as many headcount. So there's always going to be natural shift in terms of losing headcount at that point in time. But also the declining demand from China is having a massive impact. Also the price. So there's real price contention in the marketplace as well. There's a lot of pressure on price. And so we're not going to dig stuff out of the ground and sell it if it's going to cost us more than it is to produce it. So that sort of stuff needs to be considered. So there's definitely a slowdown in that mining space that's going to continue and projected to continue over the next 5 years. But healthcare is the booming industry across most states. It's the number one. The main reason is because we're all getting older. I'm definitely feeling older after being sick for 11 years. But we're all getting older, and so we're putting pressure, and we're living longer, right? So we're putting pressure at the top end of services. We need more support. We need more aged care. We need more health support. And there's also pressure on the mums to return to work. So there's more demand for childcare services. So at both ends, we're seeing this real pressure in terms of employment gaps. So we do see that that's going to continue as well. Education and training, this is interesting because we've got a really low Australian dollar, and as a result, we see a lot of international candidates wanting to come in, but also people are staying in schools longer. So with people staying in schools, getting more education, there's a greater percentage of Australians are now completing university degrees, and a lot of them are not just completing single degrees, they're completing multi-degrees, so or double degrees or majors or MBAs. So people are in training for a hell of a lot longer is going to continue to burgeon this education sector as well. Professional, scientific, technical industry. Ultimately, we're moving from a resource-rich country and we're moving into more of a professional services industry, so a highly skilled economy. And as a result, there's going to be more demand for highly educated workers. So we're going to continue to see this grow in that instance as well. Now, actually, before I move into this job outlook, which is more granular, I'm going to go back because I want to show you the industry splits. So hopefully they'll just kick you back out to my website. I'll wait till that comes up on your screen. You should see it now. So in here, they have a whole lot of Excel spreadsheets. If you love Excel, fantastic, use it. Use it as you wish. But the ones that I love are these regional projections. And the reason why I like these is because they split out the industries by region and not just state, but regional area. Now, they produce these once a year. They usually produce this Word document in around March, but it takes them so long to get all the granular data published. This one's only just been released, I think, in late June. So it takes about an extra 3 months or so to actually get this data. So this is just pretty much hot off the presses. I'm going to open it up on your screen for you. There's a bit of summary around how they collect all of the data and what their commentary is. But the tab that I always go to is this very first one. Sorry, I know that's a bit of a delay on your screens. I go to this first one, which is the 2015 regional projections. And if I'll just enable editing. If let's do healthcare. So I'll just search for healthcare, and it'll take me down to that sector. And you can see that they've split out not only New South Wales and what the total number of people employed in that category are. So that 437.4, that represents 437,400 people. They expect that there's going to be 500,000 people odd, right, in 2019. And so they expect that there's going to be 74,000 new people go into this industry over that time period of those 5 years. So that's an average of 17% growth over that 5-year period. So that's in New South Wales. And so what I would even look at is we know that across Australia for that category, it was 18.7 is what we saw earlier on my screen. So it's slightly below the national average, but as a state, but we want to see where are the pinch points, okay? Anywhere where it's more than 20% growth, you're going to find it a hell of a lot harder. So we know, what's that? Sydney, Baulkham Hills and Hawkesbury, 23.6%. You're going to be harder than the national average. It's going to be bloody tough, okay? It's about 50% more difficult than the national average for that industry and more than double the national average, which is 10% growth is expected for the national average across all industries. As we go down, so there's 23.6 there. We've also got Victoria, Victorian average is 18.7. Most difficult area would be Ballarat. Okay, 26.4%, the most difficult. Then 18.9 for Queensland. Where's the most difficult area? It looks like 23.4. 23.8 with Brisbane South. So a lot of the metro areas, Brisbane, Ipswich, 23.4. So some real pressure points there. Adelaide's not as difficult, 15.6% across all of South Australia, but the real pressure point would probably be more located around the Southeast, South Australia, Southeast. So you can start to go through and you'll know which industry you work in, which region you operate in, and then just cross-pollinate. Okay, so how does that relate to the national average, which is 10% employment growth forecast? And how does it compare to the state? How does it compare to other industries? You know, so you can start to map out, and that way when you go to speak to hiring managers, you can provide them with that level of information. And so Trina said there are new hospitals opening in Brisbane South affecting this. Great, fantastic. And you guys who are in the industry, you'll be able to give commentary, okay, additional commentary, what you know is happening in your localized area. But even if you're new to the industry, you can quickly get up to speed. Okay, you could even ask them, say, look, we've seen that there's a trend that it's going to grow double the national average in this area. Why do you think that is? And that hiring manager may well know, or the business may well know. So you don't have to be the guru holding all of the knowledge. You just need to know what data points you need to ask the right questions. Okay, so why do you think that is? And how do you think that'll affect our recruitment strategies? Right, so you get them thinking about it rather than them just ticking along going, yep, that's what we always did, this is what we did last time, we're going to do it again. Doing it again is not always going to work. So we need them to be aware that, okay, well, we can take what we did last time, but we need to consider these extra trends that are going on in the marketplace. How do you think that'll impact what we did last time? Okay, what do you think we need to do or think differently? Do you think we need to move faster? Do you think that's the problem? Do you think taking 48 days to fill a role is too long? I dare say it is, right? 21 days would be great. So ultimately thinking about all of these sorts of challenges that may exist that could do you damage in the recruitment process. Imagine doing a perfect recruitment process, but all the good candidates get other jobs in the meantime. It's just a waste of time. We want to really sharpen it up. And Amy's asked, which file did I choose to get to this one? And it's the regional projections, Amy. So I'll go back and I'll just show you that one quickly before we go back in. So there's all of these files on the screen. I'll just see if you can see that. Oops, sorry, I've just clicked away from it again. Let's see, make sure you guys can see the screen. Yep, so all of these files here, and it's the last one, regional projections. They've got an interactive tool as well, which if you're not great at using Excel, you can click on this one and it has little drop downs. So you can drop on it and choose the little different menus, and then they populate out graphs for you. So if you don't want to create it yourselves, you can actually use the interactive tool. So play around with them, see which one actually suits you and suits your style. But I really do love it. What you guys will have in the presentation that I send you later today is you'll actually have these links, and there's all hyperlinks. The LMIP has a link to that page as well. Just click on those, it'll take you back through them if you've forgotten the URL link. So now what we're going to talk about is, oh sorry, we've got another couple of questions. Rachel said, are we able to gather time to fill stats per industry from this report? No, there's no time to fill stats on here. Time to fill is actually captured in different reports, but they're usually at a government level and not at a commercial level. So I'm not sure how helpful that'll be for you. And Luke's asked, where are they getting the trend information from employer surveys? They use a whole heap of different sources. They use ABS stats. They also collect data on a monthly and quarterly basis through surveys. They do a range of different types of surveys, telephone surveys, online surveys. They use census data, which I know that's now a little bit dated, but they use a number of different sources, and they also use, I believe, ATO detail as well, just to try and cross-pollinate information on an annual basis. Now, with every projection, you've got to take it with a grain of salt. At Seek, we only project, well, we actually don't publish any of our projections. We project for our own purposes internally with our strategy guys, 3 months. 3 months. And that is probably going to give us our best, most accurate forecast. So to do a 5-year projection, you need a lot of data, and you need to be able to collect a lot of trending data as well. But there's always economical, environmental factors that could impact those projections. So it's always good to know, and it's really good to use data as a lever, but you just need to be mindful that things may change. All right, so I'm going to show you this one. This one I love. Now, if you're new to recruitment, if you have to write some PDs because your business is quite new and you don't have any position description, you have to start from scratch. If you are in recruitment and the hiring manager doesn't want to spend any time giving you a job brief and you need to really get the nuts and bolts of the role, this site can help you. If you have a hiring manager that has unrealistic expectations about the diversity that they're looking for the role, if they're looking for a certain educational level, again, this can help you, and I'm going to show you how. I'm going to go straight out to this website. I haven't put any slides in here. I just sort of want to navigate around and show you how I'd use it. So I'm going to go back to my example of looking for an electrician. Right, if you go to joboutlook.gov.au, what you'll get is this beautiful little portal. It's been built off the Department of Employment's data. Okay, so same set of data that's being used by the LMIP to do the industry piece. This is the same base of data, so they all correlate. But ultimately, what you can do is you can go either via an industry search and look through across an entire industry and all the occupations that sit within that. So if you're new to the industry, so say you want to go into industry and you want to go to you'd need to recruit in retail. Where are they? There'd be retail trade here. So it tells you all the types of roles that could potentially sit in retail, and it can help you get your head around what are all those roles in there. So if you're really new to the industry, this can be a nice little way for you to get familiar with it. Okay, so some of you on the line, I know many of you are very experienced, so I'm going to show you more of the detail that you're going to want to get into. I'm going to go back to the keyword search again, because this is mainly where I go. Now I'm going to just pause every now and again just to make sure there's enough time for it to load up on your screens. But ultimately what I'd put in the keyword field, so say I'm looking for an electrician. I just want to know, I've never recruited an electrician before, I don't have a position description for an electrician. I just had a manager call me up and say, right, Narelle, you've worked at Seek for 11 years, surely you could find me an electrician. Great. So ultimately what I would do is I go, okay, what sort of electrician am I looking for? Okay, maybe I'll just look at this general electricians. And if I click on electricians, what it does is it gives me a bucket load of information. What you get is an extra navigation bar underneath the title here. And you can click on any of these. I'm not going to go into all of them, but they have lots of really rich, interesting information. You know, all the statistics are really cool. But I'm going to show you the shortcuts. Firstly, if the hiring manager was still on the line with me and I wanted to understand what they wanted this electrician to do, then I would just skim down to tasks and I would just say, so do you want them to examine blueprints, wiring diagrams and specifications, determine sequences and methods of operation? Do you want them to measure and lay out installation reference points? Do you want them to select, cut and connect wire and cable to terminals and connectors? I'll go, wow, you really know your stuff. And that's my point. Okay, you don't need to know everything and retain it in your mind. You just need to know where to get it and how to access it quickly at the time that you need it. Now, if you're rewriting your position descriptions, you might just cut all of that out and then say to the hiring manager, which parts of these are accurate? Which bits would you need to add into that? Which bits would you take out? The one thing I don't like about all of their tasks that they have listed is that they put ings on everything. And I hate ings because it makes it blurry. The reading's blurry. It's hard to retain. So you would have heard when I read them out earlier, it just said examine blueprints, wiring diagrams and specifications, measure and lay installation reference points. So you can drop the ings in a lot of the time, so just try and keep them really sharp and concise. But that's a really great way. And if you're a recruiter and the hiring manager says, "Look, I've used you guys all the time. I don't care that you're new. I just want an electrician. Find me an electrician." Again, you can just sort of use this and build out the body of your ad. So it's a really neat way to be able to get information that you need, that's really relevant, that can position you as a subject matter expert really quickly. Now, you also need to manage their expectations. Okay, so typically if a manager just said, just do it, I probably wouldn't. I would push back on them and I'd use a lot of different data sets to help them really take ownership of the job brief that we're going to build together. So we might have the hiring manager say to us that, you know, we really, for this electrician role, we really want to ramp up our diversity. So ideally a female would be ideal for this role. We also want someone who's degree qualified and we want someone who's more mature, so more mature aged. A lot of these things, in some instances, they can't actually ask for, but they will tell you, right? Because they will say what their preferences are. And what we need to do is manage that expectation, not only legally, but also in reality as well. So I use this beautiful little report that they produce. And I'll show you again where I got that from. Let me go back because I know that I was talking when I was saying it. But across the navigation bar, there's the reports and links button, and there's a PDF. And when you click on that PDF, it opens up this beautiful little report. And the thing that I love about this is that it can help you really quickly educate the hiring manager. So we know that this category has grown significantly over the last 10 years, right? It says up here that it's employment in this very large occupation. It's 145,000 people in this occupation. It's risen strongly over the past 5 years and over the long term. And it's expected to grow strongly over the next 5 years. So if it's expected to grow strongly, it's going to be difficult to resource for because there's going to be a lot of employers in competition for the same number of candidates. So we need to be able to think differently. Okay, so we know that it's going to grow. The national average is 10%. This looks like it's going to grow at about 15%. So how flexible are you going to be? Are you going to move quicker? Can we book in interview times now? You said that you wanted someone who's degree qualified, but the educational profile shows us that 2/3 are only Cert 3 or 4 level. So if 2 out of 3 people are Cert 3 or 4 level, then we're going to rule out 2/3 of the marketplace by saying that we want at least a degree qualification. We really need to think, is that why? Why do we need that? Do we actually need a degree, or can we be more flexible there? Because often what happens is the hiring manager tells you everything that they would ideally like, but we use it verbatim, and so we rule candidates out. But the reality is that they'll go, well, it's a nice to have, and so we need to qualify that. And if they say no, it's an absolute, you say, well, you know that you're going to be ruling out 2/3 of the marketplace by saying that they must have a degree qualification. And then they'll go, oh, really? Oh, well, it's not that essential. So again, you need to push some pressure on there. You're the subject matter expert. You need to use this data so you can actually get the right brief that's going to be fillable with the right candidates. Also, if they say that this is a diversity piece for them, 6% of electricians right now are female. So do they want to target that 6%? And what percentage of those are degree qualified? Who knows? So is this the most appropriate role to be thinking about? Or should we put it on their radar? If we do have a diversity policy, say, you know what, we've had one female apply, we know that this is a minority group, and we really want to position this person with the best opportunity to be able to compete with all of the applicants, but it's something to be mindful of, especially if you have a diversity policy in place, or that you have to adhere to particular legislation because of the organisational size or government legislation that's been placed on that business. So something to really think about. But if they said that, no, it's just a nice to have because we want to look good, well, you're going to rule out 94% of the marketplace just by saying that you really want to focus on diversity for women. Again, if they want someone who's more mature, the average demographic is aged between 25 to 34. And number one, you can't discriminate. You can't just not hire young people because you don't want them. Okay, so that's first and foremost, we have to address that. But secondly, who's to say that someone who's 25 isn't mature? Okay, what attributes are you looking for that would determine that someone is mature? Well, we want them to show up on time. We want them to be reliable. We want them to be hardworking. We want them to be honest. We want them to help others. We want them to think outside the square. Okay, great. We can reference check for that. And that's the point of the reference check. It's not necessarily the point of the advertisement. So thinking about how you're going to message and manage those expectations is really key. And having independent data at your fingertips can help you get the outcomes that you believe. Okay, most of you will have gut feel. You'll know what's right. You'll know what you're looking for, what you think is going to work. And often, sometimes that conflicts with the hiring manager. So being able to do that is really important. Ian's asked, has there been any correlation between the data produced by LMIP and that of IBISWorld? Presumably there has to be some benefit in the paid service. Yeah, Ian, IBISWorld is a hell of a lot more detailed. They have business analysts that write the reports, and they have, well, obviously LMIP will as well, but they will use multiple sources, and they cover a hell of a lot more than just employment. So what the LMIP look at is purely a employment piece because it's Department of Employment data, and what the IBISWorld look at is size of market. So how much revenue is flowing through it, which industries are growing, who are the main industry players, what market share do they have, some really bulky information. And Nishida's asked, how often is this information updated? Annually. Now you can see that this particular one-pager has not been updated with the 2014 to 2019 projection. So I'm expecting that to happen in the next month because they've done all of their regional Excel spreadsheet splits now. So I would expect this to also be updated then as well. But annually is when they update it. There's a lot of data, right? There's over 400 of these one pages, but this is really useful. And so you can go through and extrapolate any one of your industries. If you work in a HR team and you know you have particular times of year where it's slower, that might be a good time to collect a lot of this information and start building it into your knowledge base. And because you can capture it at any point in time. And then I just round it out with some Seek data, which I'll show you next. But that's how I access these and the reason why I love this sort of macro external data. All right, so I'm going to move to this Seek data because as good as the external data is at a macro level, the real challenge that exists is that it's updated every 12 months or so. You can see those one pages are still yet to be updated. So what is the market doing right now? How do you actually gain access to that? And how do you understand if it's going to be easy or difficult to resource someone with a job ad or through talent search, or you need to understand before you start investing your time and your money, you need to understand which sourcing strategy is actually going to work best for you. And that's what we hope to do with the Seek data. We want to be able to give you insights into how the market's moving and then how to educate the hiring manager, but then how to choose the most appropriate sourcing strategy as a result. So there's three things that we look at. And the first thing that we look at is this sort of candidate supply and demand. We want to understand where it's going. If you are to advertise, is it going to be easy or difficult for you to be able to resource someone with a job ad alone? Then we like to look at salary offerings. So in the marketplace, what salaries are being published so that they can attract candidates? And then you can use that to work out, am I being competitive enough? And then finally looking at this candidate behaviour. How do they search online? What are they looking at? What are they clicking on? What sort of words, what sort of language are they using? So we can get a really good picture of what is the most appropriate way to try and source this talent, and how do we make sure that the brief that we have is going to work. So the first thing that we look at, I'm only going to do one industry, but I'm going to give you access to all the industries across all of the states. So I'm looking at IT across Australia, and the main reason why I'm doing that is because that's where we have the most amount of job ads. So we'd say this is the most in-demand industry in Australia because there's over 14,000 job ads at any given time on Seek. So that's the main reason why I'm covering this one, but I'll cover it and then I'll show you how to read it and interpret it, and then you do the same process with your own industry and location. So supply and demand. Supply is easy. We can see candidates coming into our site, we can see them search, we can see them click on summaries, and we can see them click on ads, and we can see them apply, right? So we can see the whole process. So supply is really easy for us to measure. Demand is really about the corresponding job ad and then the ratio that sits between them. So how likely are they to convert? So the way that we look at that conversion process is at the critical point in time when they're applying. And what we do is we take all the subclassifications and we say from lowest to highest, what are the average applications per ad? And this is an index. There is no scale on it because we don't publish our actual average applications per ad just for competitive reasons. But what we do is we index it so you can see that, okay, if I'm looking for someone in security, it is the most difficult role to resource for nationally. So I would advise the hiring manager as such. Okay, we're looking for someone in security, or we're looking for someone with security specialist skills. That's going to be the most difficult role to resource for. So how flexible are you going to be here? And that's how I'd start my conversations. The other thing that's really interesting is, well, computer operators, they're sort of on the way out. So there's very few of them and there's very low demand, but they're sort of going on the out. So that's why they're so low. Other, don't list your ad in other if you can help it. Okay, if you can list it under something else, do that, because candidates aren't necessarily applying to roles in other in volumes. Okay, they're being quite discretionary. There's sometimes where you can't choose a subclassification. That's okay, put it in other, but if you can avoid it, I would. But ultimately, I'd be saying here, if I am looking for someone in security, not only do I need to push back on the hiring manager, telling them that's going to be the hardest, but is an ad going to work for me? It might, but I might be in high competition. I might need to be really competitive on salary. I might need to make sure that my messaging is really nailed. I need to make sure that the opportunity is really clearly described. I need to execute that advertising process so well so that I can outplay everyone else and hopefully get the lion's share of candidates, which might still be very, very small. Or should I be proactively searching for that talent? Okay, and you can do both. You don't when you post an ad on Seek, you have this ability to do both advertising and searching. You don't have to just limit it to advertising alone. And it doesn't cost any more to search. Now, if you're not doing that, you absolutely should be coming to the third session today on talent search methods, because we show you how you do it. But ultimately, you might want to proactively go in and say, I'm going to have a look. I want to find out where these security people are. Tell me the companies that you'd like to headhunt out of. I'm going to see if we've got any there. Would you take candidates from interstate? Okay, no worries. I'll find candidates who are willing to relocate to our location, and then have a look for all of those and come back to you day one of posting the role and tell you what that candidate supply may look like. So you can take more control back. Yeah, Sandra said Seek subclass aren't very diversified. It's a great comment, Sandra, and I completely agree. We're looking at some modelling now, have been for probably a good 12 months, where we're coming up with, we're going to use data science to be able to basically dissolve the subclassifications over time. So ultimately what will happen is that candidates will power what they search for, you guys will power what jobs exist, and classification and subclassification will become almost null and void. Ultimately, people will be looking at industry and function. So keep an eye on this space. We actually believe that, we could keep going and going and going with classifications, make them so really narrow, but that might not be the best solution, because things keep changing. The market's moving so quickly and evolving so quickly. New roles are developing over time. So we need a more agile, more capable search methodology that's going to meet that. And you'll see a few things happen this year. We'll actually change the look and feel of our homepage. That will enable the first step of that. And then the next steps will come over a longer period, but will ultimately migrate away from class and subclass. Marianne said imaging technical staff are very hard to source through Seek as well, ultrasound techs. Any work done to promote Seek to candidates to create their profiles on Seek? Yeah, we do lots of work to promote profiles. What I'm going to do now, I'm just conscious that we've got 9 minutes to get through the remainder of this deck. I'll keep going, and then if you have more questions, I'll park them and answer them at the end if you guys could stay on the line for me. But ultimately, we do a lot of work in terms of profiles, but we look at candidate behaviour to do it. So if a candidate hasn't been into Seek for 3 months, then we go back out and we push back out through their profiles and promote to them. If they have been in and looking at Seek, then we don't, because we have other ways on site to be able to promote to them. So if those candidates haven't been on site, we'll push out an email or a targeted EDM, encouraging and enticing them back, and also to update their profiles. But we have more than 180,000 new profiles created every month. It's massive. We've got more than 3.6 million searchable profiles. So that's more than 1 in 3 working Australians, right? It's so big. Definitely, if you're interested in talent search, come to that session this afternoon. But what it does, it gives you control. And you go, okay, well, maybe if I do advertise, I'm going to advertise but search also. Or maybe I don't even want to search. I don't even want to advertise. Maybe I just want to have a look first and then decide what I'm going to do. And you do have that capability as well, but it just depends on the way that you're set up with Seek. Some people have just asked, I will answer this one, where do you go to get this data right now? I'm going to give it to you. So in your Handouts section, there's the Australian data, and it has every single classification mapped this way, from highest applications per ad to lowest, and I've done it down the page. But for the next slide, what I'm going to show you is salary, okay? Because if you are looking for someone in security and your hiring manager is only willing to pay $100,000, and what you can say is, well, the average is 116. So we might not be hitting the mark. Maybe we need to move on salary. Maybe we need to consider what our benefits are, what our brand is, how we position that, and how do we make sure we message it accurately, because all this sort of stuff is going to be important. Because if they say, well, I want you to go and recruit for 100,000 and you just can't find the best talent, you might be handing them candidates that are only C grade quality. They go, what's wrong with these candidates? Can't you get any good candidates? And well, no, you can't, because you're not being competitive enough. So you need to understand why you may be having barriers to talent, and this is a really good way to educate on the way through. And I use this all the time. We had a role for a PR manager, and that PR manager was a very senior role, and well, it's a PR manager in itself is a senior role usually, but this role was actually more of a marketing executive with sort of journalistic background. And as a result, we're paying about 20 or 30 grand below the national average for a PR manager. And so we had to reassess, is it actually a PR manager or is it actually a marketing executive with PR skills? And if you market it as a marketing executive, it sat really well in that category. So it's just making sure that you're choosing the most appropriate role and that you're sourcing the most appropriate level of talent to be able to fill that role as well. Now, in terms of candidate behaviour, if you are going to advertise, you want to know how are we going to execute this well. One thing that we do know is 5 years ago, less than 2% of our traffic was via a mobile device. Today, it's 59% of traffic via mobile. So the one ad that you post needs to work everywhere. So always consider that experience for the candidate across desktop and mobile. If you've never used your mobile phone to search for your job and apply for it, make sure you do that because candidates are applying to roles via mobile devices. So we want to make sure that your apply experience is really positive as well. But the main way that they search, they use a combination. They'll use location. Location is massive. They'll use keyword and they use classification. Now, whenever I show keyword, people say, what are the keywords? So we've got that for you as well. Top 20 keywords. They usually, by industry, they usually skew towards role title, but with this particular industry, it's more by skill. And that's because it's IT. Okay, if they're a developer, they'll be a developer with C++, kernel, C#, .NET, Java, JavaScript. They'll use those terms. So it's about making sure you get the right language in. But everything's very generic. There's no fancy words in here. You don't need to have fancy job titles. It just needs to be stuff that candidates can relate to and connect with. All right, so this is what you guys are after. When you get this PDF or even when you download it, so in your handout, so if you're in your little toolbox, you'll have a handout section. And in that handout section, what I want you guys to look at is this page, this slide, and there's all hyperlinks. If you hover over them, you'll see that there's hyperlinks out to where you can download these files from. So you click on these and there's one for Australia and that'll give you all the classifications at an Australian level, at a national level, and it'll give you average applications per ad, salary data, candidate behaviour and top 20 keywords, but by subclass or by classification. And if you don't care about all of Australia, you only want Queensland, just download the Queensland one. If you only care about New South Wales, Victoria, whatever, whichever market you're in, we've done all the same slices by state, but these are the only states that we've covered. If you're in NT, Tassie, or ACT, we didn't have a large enough sample size to cut it down, but let me know if you are interested in getting some data specific to you. Let me know, send me an email and I'll see what we can get extracted out. We may need to look at a larger time period, but we like to do monthly captures so we can give you real-time insights. So definitely have a look at this. If you want more depth of data, so we do collect a lot more, but we don't publish everything, speak to your Seek account manager. They can extract data for you. It would be a manual process, but they can extract some data for you and share it with you. We just need to understand what is it that you're actually trying to do. So more tell them what your problem is and what you're trying to find out, and then they'll try and work out which data set's going to be the most appropriate for you. So definitely reach out to us. We provide all this training and all the insights for free. So definitely let us know. So this is what I want you guys to walk away with, right? I want you to be able to think at a big picture. I want you to be able to go, okay, I understand what's happening in Australia. I understand how my marketplace relates to the national average. And I feel confident that I can go out to hiring managers and position that. Okay, it might be if you're a recruitment consultant, rather than just doing it at time of job brief, you should be developing these relationships with companies outside of that. So going out and talking to them about, okay, within your industry, your market is moving and it's moving quite considerably. So we need to rethink the way that we've always worked together. We may need to move into a more exclusive relationship, and this is how I see it coming together. These are the sorts of tools that I have at my disposal. And being able to set up those relationships in advance can be really powerful because you're going out and you're providing insight and information on the industry that they operate in that they may not have had time to research themselves. You can also then use the real-time supply and demand data, the salary offerings, to be able to understand how easy or difficult is it going to be to source that candidate. Okay, if you can say that the security roles are the most difficult role to resource for nationally, and if you're only paying $100,000, you're about 16 grand behind the average. So how flexible are you going to be? That can be really powerful. Okay, you can really help influence the hiring manager for them to get shaken up a little bit and say, oh, all right, well then, yeah, that brief that I gave you probably won't work. So maybe we need to tweak it a little bit. Maybe we need to have a little bit more flexibility in these areas so you can get a more robust brief and really make some significant impacts. And then ultimately, if you are going to advertise, understand what candidates are doing. If you can understand that they're using mobile, that the experience that they have there needs to be pleasurable. If you can't do that, then you're going to miss the boat on actually converting that candidate from looking at your ad to applying to it. And if you need more tips on that, we cover that in the next session, which is advertising principles. But ultimately, you want to get that journey right. Because at the end of the day, what it will help you do is plan better. It will help you take better job briefs. You'll be able to identify which sourcing strategy is going to be the best one. It'll increase the quality of your applications. But the other thing that it'll do, it'll help you manage and control interview processes and also the speed at which you can execute the whole process. And one thing that I will give you as advice, and I always did this for my teams in recruitment as well, is that the moment that you take the job brief, you lock in the interviews as well. Because a hiring manager having to find 3 interview times in their diary in 3 weeks from now is easier to do right now than it is that week. Okay, so if I call them up and say, hey, I've got 3 perfect candidates, I want them to come in today or tomorrow, are you available? They say, no, I'm not available. My diary's booked out for the whole week. Can we do it next week? Too late, you could lose those good candidates. So I always book in the interviews at the time of taking the job brief. Okay, I think it'll take me about 3 weeks to source these candidates. I'm going to lock in your diary now for these 3 times. If I only have 2 candidates, fine, we'll cancel one of them. The hiring manager will love you. Get an hour back in my diary. Fantastic. So really think about doing these things, because if you can do that, if you can take loads of really complex data, break it down into something that's very simple, but then message it in a very compelling way that makes sense. Not only will you position yourself as a subject matter expert, but you will be a hell of a lot better at executing that talent sourcing strategy as well. Guys, I'm going to open the floor for questions. I'm conscious that we're now at time, so anyone that wants to stay on the line, please post your questions now and I'll answer them for you before we close off the session. Okay, so Leanne's asked, why is the veterinary industry not represented in your job classifications? Veterinary, I believe it falls under farming, animals and conservation. That's probably where I would look for that level of detail. I'm not familiar if the subclass is in there or not, but what we would see is if there's anything that's what we would say is missing, then candidates would typically keyword search. So I'd be really mindful to make sure that you use variations, so vet, veterinary. If there's any other words that candidates would use, I'd make sure you utilise those, because candidates will have a propensity to do that. And if we open up the industry insights, we've got the top 20 keywords that are used. I'm not sure, but I've got a feeling that vet or veterinary might be in there under animals, farming and conservation. I think it's farming, animals and conservation. So have a look at that one, Lee. Natasha says she doesn't have access to the handouts. Don't worry, we'll be sending these all through to you tomorrow. So anyone that couldn't download them out of the little toolbox area, don't worry, we'll send these through tomorrow for you. Sandra asked, how are we getting the salary data? And the salary data is when you guys post an ad. So you put in your minimum salary and your maximum salary. And what we do is we find the midpoint. And that midpoint's being published in those reports. That's fine. And is the salary inclusive of super? No. Candidates don't search that way. So I'd always list your salary excluding super. If it's a sales role, I would do the on-target earnings. So you might see OTE being used. So that might be 100 OTE, and I would say that the OTE is 100 and it consists of a 70K base and 30K uncapped commission plus car allowance, maybe something like that. And that way the candidates understand the structure and they can work out if it's going to be appropriate for them. That's fine. Where did you find the overview of stats? I can see the details under each role, but can't find the big picture. Stats, I can see the details under each role. I'm not sure, Tracy. I'm not sure what that question means. I might take that one offline with you. Jeff's asked, Narelle, can I get an email address to send a request for industry insights for ACT? Yep, no worries, Jeff. I'll set that one aside and we'll make sure we get some details through for you. Thank you. Jason said, thank you for the session. I work for World Vision, and while our roles are fairly niche, we can still educate hiring managers on how we compare in industry. Yeah, I think I think the good thing about data is that it can be interpreted however you want, right? So you pick and choose which information is going to help support the arguments that you're trying to put forward because they're from reliable and credible sources. And that's the main part, is if you can actually use independent data as evidence to support your argument or something that you're trying to do or change in your business, that's how you're going to get some momentum and leverage as well. You need to really position yourself there. Prani has asked, are keyword search sourced from the job ad itself or only in the blurb? Everywhere, every single component of content, so the blurb and the body of the ad. I know you said there are various reasons for the employment rate increasing. In your opinion, what's the main reason? Okay, so there's two things going on. Unemployment rate is actually increasing right now, and there's a bit in terms of political reasons as to why that's happening, and also businesses feeling a little bit nervous in terms of overcapitalizing. We're still shifting from a resource-rich country into more of a professional services and technical. So we're seeing states like New South Wales and Victoria actually lift, but areas like Queensland, SA, WA are still softening. So we're seeing pockets. It's still a very fragmented marketplace. So in terms of unemployment rate, that's still continuing to rise, but over the longer term, over the projection, the total number of people being employed is growing. And one, because we've got an increasing population. Two, businesses want to make more money, so they do want to expand their businesses. And three, we just when the population rises, extra pressure is placed on services. So we need more housing, we need more healthcare, we need more childcare. So a lot of those fundamental, and education, a lot of those fundamental industries will rise, and as a result, there'll be more people buying. So there'll be more pressure on retail trade. So everything sort of hinges off the growth in the population. There's sort of this natural upward trend. So there's a lot of that just happening organically. But as business confidence continues to return across a number of different industries, we do expect that 10% employment growth over a 5-year period, that will probably burgeon up. So definitely, and it's something just to be mindful of, so keep an eye on that space. Gail said, absolutely loving this webinar. Notice that it's being recorded. Will you be sending a link? Absolutely, we'll be sending a link to the recording. So thank you so much. And anyone that wants to play it back, or any of their colleagues, can play it back later as well. Edwards asked, I was wondering, what is the success rate of talent search as a headhunting tool? I love talent search personally. I'm an ex-recruiter. I used to do headhunting as well. If I had a preference, I would probably search first, advertise second, because it takes time to advertise. Searching, super easy. We tend to see that recruiters typically use it more than corporates, largely because they need real-time access to candidates immediately and a really vast talent pool. And candidates are their lifeblood, so they have more time to dedicate just to pure searching. But the success rate's really good. I know in the first year of it operating, there was something like, I think it was 1.6 million placements made out of just talent search alone. So we know that people are using it and having great success with it. We use it as a business ourselves. And the reason why it typically works is because you know what you're looking for. When you write an ad, it's very difficult to communicate that. Someone reads it, they interpret it, they don't know, they're sort of looking at it, oh, maybe it's too hard, maybe there's a barrier to apply, maybe you're asking for too much information, and there's a deterrent somewhere along the line. Whereas with talent search, all the candidate needs to do is say, I'm just going to put down everything that I want. Here's my resume, here's where I'm living, here's where I'm willing to move to, here's how much money I want, here's my top 10 skills. Now, if you think I'm right for you, get in contact with me. And the hiring manager can go, okay, well, I've had a look through and I know what I want. And even though you may not hold the job title that I typically look for, you've got all the functional skills that I'm looking for, and you're after the money I want, and you're in the location that I want. So yeah, I'm interested in you, and these are the reasons why. And so it helps provide this environment where people can actually make a connection. Tracy said, let me just see, it's just scrolled off my screen. It is in Job Outlook. You showed it earlier on, and we could break it down to regional. I just can't seem to find it on the Australian government site. Okay, yep. So the regional splits, Tracy, that's on the LMIP website. So I'll just go back here. So LMIP, you'll see it on your screen in a second. You'll have a link from the presentation itself. It's not sort of going back. Here we go. you'll have a link on the presentation itself that will take you directly to this landing page, and it's the very last hyperlink here, Regional Projections Excel. That's where it has the regional breakdown. So if that's the one that you're after, go for that one. All right. And Petra, for the average of salaries, is there an average of experience included? No, we don't do that yet. I think once we move away from the classification and subclassification model, what will happen is that we'll be able to track by job title, and we actually use a lot of query intent already. So we know industry, years of experience, skill level, and we understand the job title itself. So if it's senior, junior, graduate, manager, so we're able to break apart those components. We are still building the logic around how do we report on them. So we do expect that not too far in the distant future, basically, we're going to have a lot more robust reporting that can help people really identify um, not only the average salary, but by level, by role type, by location, and very granular location. So whatever we can have right now, this is probably your first exposure or bite into it, but we will see that this will continue to get deeper and more granular and more relevant. So use what we can get you right now and keep an eye on it. We'll promote it once we have some more robust data that's a hell of a lot more granular. Okay, a couple of people have left. I filled 3 roles from talent search in the last 3 months. Oh, Marianne, that's fantastic. Yeah, look, I saw, who was it? I saw cash converters in WA. They were fantastic, and they said that they advertised for a role, they got perfect candidate, they filled the role. The candidate, 1 week before they were due to start, they said, no, actually, we're not going to take the role. And they've gone, we really need to fill this role right now. And so what did they do? They said, well, we don't have time to go through our recruitment process. So they searched for talent, and they used the talent search process. They found 8 candidates that they were interested in, and they sent them a message. And 5 of those 8, well, all 8 responded, but 5 of the 8 were in a location that was near the store that they were interested in filling the role for. The other 3 said, no, not interested now that I know the location. The other 5 all came through interviews, and they ended up placing one of the candidates. They could have placed 3. They said the quality was great because they chose them. So, it's amazing. It's just, I think, a mindset change that you can take control. You don't have to wait for candidates to apply. And if I had my own recruitment business today, I absolutely would be using talent search. I'd be in there, be finding all the candidates I want, all the cream of the crop. I'd be identifying which companies I get the best talent out of, and I'd be headhunting them out of those businesses. So it's just such a great tool. And I'll talk more about it this afternoon. Catherine's asked if she can get a link to the search session today, and absolutely, Catherine, I'll make sure we get that through to you. It will most likely come through either tomorrow or later this week. Gail said, maybe I'm just not very good at the talent search thing, but I've never actually found anyone that way. Either the candidates don't have the skills I'm looking for, or the ones I do notify never actually apply. Is there a trick to this? Yeah, come along, Gail. There's definitely a little bit of an art to it, because it's a colder approach, the candidate's not actively saying, I'm choosing you. So you need to get them to choose you throughout the approach. So we'll go into not only the best search techniques to find the best candidates, but also the best engagement techniques. So how do you actually script a really well-written approach? How do you actually write that? How do you message it? How do you talk to it? So we'll go through all of that as well. Nikki Keynes just said, I love talent search. Thank you very much. Trudy said, will there be a way to talent search without having to advertise first? Currently, we can only see whilst the advert is live. And Trudy, yes, we have just launched it in April. And when I go through talent search this afternoon, I'll take you through that. Because it's not adjoined to a job ad, it's a paid service. So that's the only thing I'd flag. It's pretty cheap, to be honest, but what it does, it gives you complete control and flexibility and some extra functionality. So we prefer the premium search method for us. I guess the free method, it's just faster because it takes content out of the job body of the ad and it searches for candidates on your behalf. So you don't have to do a lot of the initial search algorithm. But with the premium option where you can just search willy-nilly without a job ad, then you need to be a little bit smarter in the way that you write your algorithms. So write your little keyword searches and things like that, but we'll go through that this afternoon. And yes, you can. Marianne said, yes, it is great, just not for ultrasound, in which I have a lot of shortage. Oh, ultrasound, yeah, it's hard, that category. So it's really tough, but we will build out those really niche areas. And, 1 in 3 working Australians at the moment, we would really expect that would be 1 in 2 working Australians in the next 12 months. So we should get some of the market there. Trudy said she can't attend the talent search, but it will be recorded, so we'll send you through a link as well, Trudy. And Donna's asked, what is your view about including super as a small business? At 9.5% of salaries, it's a significant cost. We generally include. However, reviewing the national average doesn't make a job post attractive. What do you think? Candidates don't care about super. They don't. They don't even look at it because it's not going to contribute to what they could potentially take home. So when candidates talk about salaries, they talk about, I want a 50K salary. That's what they talk about, and that is 50K plus super. And so that's the way that we'd always message it. And if you wanted to say that it's 50K plus 9.5% super, that's fine, you could do that, but we'd really talk to more what the base salary is, what they will be taxed on, what they'll be able to potentially earn. If it's not attractive, then it's something that you need to be mindful of. If you're not attractive in salary and you can't move on it, because some businesses can't, if that's what you can pay, it might be an award wage, it might be that your business just doesn't have the funds to be able to do that. As a small business, you'll be limited in what you can actually pay for roles. Then what's the benefit of working for you guys? And I'd capture that. I'd really position that. So maybe it's that maybe that you're based not in the CBD, but you might be based in a local area, so people can easily get to it and from it, and they might be able to park there. Maybe you do team events where they can participate and have a really good work-life balance, because the top 3 drivers for attracting a new person into a business, even though salary features in the top 3, it's not necessarily the most salary for most people. It's usually a salary that meets my core-based needs. So can I survive on that salary? And then they look at other things. So what is my career development opportunity? And if there's career development opportunities in your business, great. As a small business, maybe it's learning on the job. Maybe you need to hire more junior people so they can have career development. So rethinking the way that you hire people. Maybe it's the fact that you're willing to support them if they're going off to do a course. You might do some supporting there and get some maybe vet fee help or something to help you through that process. The other thing that you need to think about is work-life balance. That's number 3 on the list. So are you in a location that can encourage that? Do you have good flexibility with their start and finish times? Do you have an online rostering system, or can they select their own shifts? What is it that helps them to really enjoy coming to work? And when you go to even write that ad, and I talk about this in the next session, but when you go to write your ad, it's really about positioning why other people who are like-minded choose to work in your organization. And that's the real clincher, because people want to work with like-minded people. And so you say, people choose to work for us because, okay, and then you put that in there. Maybe it's sales experts choose to work in our business because, and then you start to go off from that point. If it's a call center role, maybe, or even customer service experts choose to work with us because we have dedicated career development and mentoring plans that saw 50% of our staff promoted in the last 12 months. You've got to find that point of difference, the thing that's going to add meaning to those individuals. And if you don't know, ask your people. Ask people who currently work for you. All right, I think that's all of the questions. Thank you so much for your time today, everyone. Great round of questions. It's been fantastic. Now, if you are interested, our next session starts in about 45 minutes, so I'm going to get set up for that one. And we're going to be talking about advertising principles, so really dissecting what are the big 4 buckets that you really need to focus on when you're going through a sourcing strategy where advertising is the primary lever for you, and what you can be doing differently. So what are the emerging trends? What do we need to be thinking about and planning for and scoping for moving forward? So I hope you can make it to that one, and good luck with your talent sourcing strategies for the remainder of the year. Thanks, guys.